The desert remembers everything. The footsteps of outlaws, the cries of widows, the bitter taste of blood carried on the wind. And in the heart of it all, Redwater waited, cracked, hollow, a town half alive and half buried already. Its streets told stories of broken men. The saloon leaned with shadows instead of laughter. The church bell hung rusted and silent. Doors creaked, shutters closed when strangers passed. Redwater wasn't just dying, it was already dead. It just hadn't stopped breathing yet. But sometimes the past stirs. Sometimes a promise doesn't stay buried. On the horizon, a lone rider cut against the burning sky. His figure was swallowed in dust, his shadow trailing like a ghost. No one knew his name. No greeting followed him. Only the slow, steady beat of hooves pounding against a land that never forgave. And somewhere beyond those weary streets, a woman felt it before she saw it. Hannah. She had built her life on stubborn hands and sleepless nights, raising her boy against hunger, against fear. Yet her heart was marked by a wound that had never healed. Once, a vow was spoken to her. A vow to protect, to love, to stay. But time turned that vow to ash. Still, the desert doesn't forget, and neither did she. Because in Redwater, promises weren't written on paper. They were carved in fire, paid in blood, and carried in the rising curl of gun smoke. Before we dive into the story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got an extra special story waiting for you. One that'll touch your heart and blow your mind. Don't miss it. Redwater always noticed a stranger, especially one who rode in slow, head bowed, the weight of dust and silence clinging to his shoulders. The sun bled low across the sky, turning the town's crooked street into a strip of fire. His horse's hooves struck the boards of the main road like a drumbeat calling the town to witness. Curtains twitched. Shutters creaked shut. Mothers pulled children indoors. Men at the saloon doorway froze, mugs halfway to their lips. A stranger in Redwater meant trouble, and everyone here had already buried too much of it. He didn't speak, didn't nod, just rode through the hush like a ghost wandering back to its grave. His hat brim cut shadows across his face, but the set of his jaw told its own story. He wasn't passing through. He had come for something. The air thickened as he dismounted, boots hitting dirt heavy with purpose. His hand brushed the dust from his coat, but it didn't hide the revolver resting low at his side. Polished, cared for, hungry. The kind of weapon that never slept. Whispers cracked the silence. Who is he? Looks like trouble. Lord help us, Redwater's cursed again. From across the street, a pair of eyes found him. Hannah. Standing frozen in the doorway of the general store, her heart twisted in her chest. Anger, relief, love, betrayal, all tangled into one shattering moment. The past had just walked back into Redwater. Hannah didn't move at first. She stood in the doorway of the general store, her hand gripping the frame so hard the wood splintered beneath her palm. 10 years of silence crashed into a single moment, and there he was, dust in his hair, shadow on his face, and that same look in his eyes. The look that once made her heart ache with hope, and later burn with fury. He stopped when he saw her. The street seemed to vanish. The saloon, the whispers, the setting sun, all of it blurred into nothing. For him, there was only her. Hannah, he finally said, voice low, cracked from miles of silence. Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice. Once that voice had promised her forever. Now it only scraped at wounds that had never healed. She stepped forward, chin high, tears burning hot but refusing to fall. You don't get to say my name, she whispered sharply. Not after leaving. Not after. Her words faltered, breaking under the weight of 1,000 nights spent waiting. He opened his mouth, but she lifted her hand, stopping him cold. You made a promise. You broke it, and because of that, I had to become strong enough to live without you. The boy, Sam, appeared from behind her skirts, his wide eyes curious, searching. He stared at the stranger, then at his mother. And for the first time in 10 years, Elias Crow felt the true weight of the promise he had broken. Redwater's uneasy calm shattered like glass when the first riders appeared over the horizon. Dust clouds rolled toward the town like a storm, each hoofbeat echoing like a drum of warning. The townsfolk froze, mouths agape, hearts pounding. This was no ordinary arrival. Jeb Carver's men. The air itself seemed to bend under their presence. Lawless, relentless, and merciless. They rode with the arrogance of men who owned the world, eyes cold, revolvers glinting, spurs ringing against the sun-baked boards of Redwater's streets. Hannah's hand shot to Sam's shoulder, holding him tight. "Stay behind me," she hissed, voice trembling but firm. Her heart thudded violently, not from fear, but from a rising storm of helplessness. The riders dismounted, boots kicking up dust and ruin. One of them spat on the ground near the general store. "Land or blood," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Carver wants it. You got 24 hours to pay, or we burn this town to dust." Sam clung to her skirts, eyes wide. Redwater had survived droughts, robberies, and sickness, but nothing had prepared them for the cold cruelty of Carver's men. Hannah's jaw set. Her mind raced, calculating, plotting. She had survived this long, but survival alone wasn't enough. Not when her son's life hung in the balance. Across the street, the rider watched silently, eyes narrowing, fists clenched. He hadn't said a word since stepping into Redwater. But now his presence was a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The town held its breath. The sun dipped lower, and in that heavy, choking air, the first real chaos had arrived. The streets of Redwater seemed smaller now, narrower, as if the town itself leaned in to watch him, to judge him. The riders' boots kicked up dust with each step, but inside, a storm raged louder than any gunfight outside. 10 years of silence. 10 years of regret. 10 years of remembering the night he left. Hannah's face pale in the firelight. Sam curled against his brother. And the vow that had been spoken with blood in his throat. He had promised. Sworn. Vowed to stay. To protect. To love. And then he had turned his back, riding into darkness, leaving them to survive on hope and grit. He had thought it was cowardice to stay. Now he knew it was a crime. Every house he passed whispered their absence. The wind carried voices. His brother's laughter, Hannah's cry, Sam's small hands clinging to hers. Memories collided with the present, a sharp ache in his chest. He wanted to run, to hide, to vanish into the desert again, but the weight of the gun at his hip anchored him. He paused at the center of town, feeling the eyes of every soul hidden behind shuttered windows. He could almost hear Hannah's heartbeat, steady and defiant, daring him to approach, daring him to confess, daring him to try. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the streets, shadows that mirrored his own guilt. And in that golden, choking light, he realized something. Promises aren't measured by words. They are measured by the courage to face the consequences. For the first time in 10 years, he took a deep breath. He would not leave again. Not tonight. Not ever. The late afternoon sun threw long, jagged shadows across Redwater, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill creeping through the town. A low rumble of hooves announced the arrival of Carver himself. Not just his men this time. He came. The Baron who had crushed farms, families, and hope alike now walked into their streets with the arrogance of a man untouchable. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into dust, eyes scanning every face like a predator counting his prey. His spurs rang against the wooden planks of the main street, a sound sharper than any gunshot. "You've got something I want," Carver said, his voice smooth, cold, and dangerous. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air, heavy as lead. "Hannah's land. And I don't like waiting." The townsfolk shifted uneasily. Children clutched their mothers' skirts. Men glanced at their weapons but stayed rooted, knowing this wasn't a fight they could win. Hannah squared her shoulders, her hands trembling but fists steady. "You'll get nothing," she spat, her voice stronger than she felt. "We'll fight if we have to." Carver's smile was cruel, stretching across a face that had broken more dreams than the desert had sand grains. 24 hours, he said. "Pay, or I take what I want by fire and blood. That's the law here." From the shadows, the rider's hand twitched near his holster, eyes never leaving Carver, silent, watching, calculating. The town held its collective breath, knowing the storm had fully arrived. The air was thick with tension, with fear, with the promise of violence. And in Redwater, one thing was clear. No one would walk away unscathed. The town's chaos had receded into a tense silence. But inside Hannah's home, a different storm raged. The rider leaned against the doorway, coat dusted with grit, eyes searching hers. For a heartbeat, the weight of anger, betrayal, and longing pressed between them like a knife. "Hannah," he began, voice rough with years of regret. She looked away, tracing the cracks in the wooden floor, trying to steel herself. Don't speak that name unless you mean to fix what you broke." He stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, as if moving too fast might shatter the fragile trust that remained. "I meant it," he whispered. "Back then, I was a coward. I thought leaving would protect you, protect him. But all I did was leave you alone. And I've spent 10 years trying to carry the weight of that mistake." Her breath hitched. 10 years of nights spent waiting, fearing, loving in silence, all poured into a single tear she refused to shed. She finally turned, eyes glistening, fury and longing tangled together. "You left when we needed you most. Do you know what it's like to raise a boy alone, thinking the one man who promised to be there would never come back?" He lowered his head, shame and sorrow etched into every line of his face. Sam peeked from behind her skirts, wide-eyed, sensing the fragile bridge being rebuilt before him. "I'm here now," he said softly. "I'll never leave again. Not for anyone. Not for anything." For the first time in a decade, hope flickered. Love had not died. It had merely waited, patient, like the desert sun, ready to rise again. The quiet that had settled over Redwater shattered in an instant. Carver's men stormed the streets, riding like wolves with fire in their eyes, shouting orders that ripped through the afternoon stillness. Dust swirled, mingling with the metallic tang of fear that hung heavy in the air. Hannah's heart leapt into her throat as Sam screamed, yanked from her arms by rough, merciless hands. "No! Sam!" Her voice cracked, echoing through the town like a gunshot itself. The rider's eyes blazed. Every ounce of restraint snapped away as he drew his revolver, the familiar weight steady and cold in his hands. He moved like a storm released, boots pounding, coat flaring, every step a promise he would not fail again. Carver's men laughed cruelly, tossing Sam onto a horse like a prize, spurring it toward the horizon. "Run, lady," one sneered. "Your boy rides with us now." "Hope you can catch him." Hannah clutched at empty air, fury and terror ripping her apart. Her hands shook, but the rider caught her arm, voice low, determined. "I will bring him back. I swore it. I won't fail." The town watched, breath held, as chaos tore Redwater apart. Windows shattered under the shock of gunfire, doors swung open, and townsfolk scattered, shouting prayers or curses. Dust and smoke rose, curling like fingers around their ankles, dragging the promise of destruction through every street. The rider's gaze never left Sam's fleeing figure. Every step, every heartbeat, every thunderous gallop of the horse reminded him of the weight he carried. A promise was more than words. It was blood. It was fire. It was the only thing worth dying for. Night fell like a shroud over Redwater, but the rider couldn't rest. The town lay in uneasy silence, its streets empty, its people trembling behind shuttered windows. He stood in the dust-swept square, hands tight around his revolvers, eyes scanning the horizon where Sam had been taken. Hannah appeared beside him, silent but steady, her face pale in the moonlight, fear and fury warring in her eyes. "He's just a boy," she whispered, voice raw. "You can't—" "I can and I will," he cut in, voice low, trembling with a mixture of anger and determination. "I promised. 10 years ago I failed. Tonight, I pay that debt. I don't care if it costs me everything. I don't care if I never see this town safe again." Sam comes back. The wind carried the faint echo of hooves in the distance, a reminder that Carver's men were already far ahead. Every heartbeat thundered in his chest. Every memory of leaving Hannah and Sam before flashed like lightning behind his eyes. The guilt, the love, the fear. It all collided, forging a single, burning purpose. Hannah reached for his arm, gripping it tightly. "Be careful," she murmured. "Come back to us." He nodded, but his gaze was fixed beyond her, on the darkness where danger waited. "I won't fail this time. Not for love, not for promise, not for the boy." And with that, he mounted his horse, the night swallowing him whole. The streets of Redwater were silent, but the storm had already begun, and nothing would be the same again. Rain hammered the streets of Redwater, turning dust to mud, mixing with the scent of gunpowder and fear. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the crooked rooftops and the shadows of Carver's men. "Somewhere," Sam whimpered, trapped between life and death. The rider faced Carver at the town's center, boots planted in the mud, revolvers drawn. His coat clung to him, soaked and heavy, but his eyes burned with relentless purpose. Carver grinned, unshaken, as if the storm itself bent to his will. "You fight for love?" Carver mocked, voice cutting through thunder. "Love makes men weak." The rider didn't answer. He aimed, steadying his breathing, every muscle taut. The echoes of 10 years of guilt, 10 years of broken promises, and 10 years of longing surged inside him. Love didn't make him weak. It made him unstoppable. Gunfire erupted, a symphony of chaos. Bullets tore through wood and rain, sparks flying with each strike. The rider moved like a shadow, precise and merciless, taking out Carver's men one by one. Each shot was a promise kept, each step a vow fulfilled. Finally, it was just him and Carver. The Baron lunged, but the rider's revolver spoke first. Carver crumpled into the mud, lightning illuminating the victory and the cost. The rider fell to his knees, chest heaving, soaked in rain and blood, his eyes scanning the horizon. Sam ran into the street, Hannah at his side, tears streaming. For a moment, silence fell. Redwater exhaled, holding its breath, knowing this storm had been survived, but at a price. The rain slowed, leaving Redwater drenched and silent, the town holding its breath as the storm of violence faded. The rider knelt in the mud, chest burning, every breath a ragged struggle. Carver was gone. Sam was safe. But victory had its price. Hannah ran to him, clutching his arm, her tears washing the grime and blood from his face. "No, no, please," she whispered, voice breaking. "You can't leave me. You can't leave him." He shook his head faintly, pain etched deep in every line of his face. His voice faltered. He tried to smile, weakly, but the world tipped around him. The bullets, the years, the promises, they had all demanded their toll. He had given everything. Sam ran forward, small hands gripping his father's, or the man who had become a father in his absence, tight. "Don't go!" he cried. The rider's hand reached up, brushing Hannah's cheek, tracing the tears he had caused and tried to erase over a decade. "I promised you. I promised him. And I kept it," he murmured. The words were soft, almost lost to the wind, but they carried the weight of everything he had been and everything he had tried to be. Hannah fell to her knees beside him, holding him close, feeling the warmth fade. The town watched in silence, the echoes of gunfire replaced by a grief so thick it pressed against every heart. He closed his eyes, a faint smile lingering, and whispered, "Love and promises. they're worth everything. As his body slumped into the mud, the rising sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light on a town saved, a boy protected, and a promise fulfilled, even in the face of sacrifice. The morning sun rose over Redwater, brushing the town in gold and warmth for the first time in years. The streets were still scarred, boards splintered, dust and mud caked into every corner. But life had returned to the town, quiet and cautious, yet alive. Hannah stood at the edge of the street, Sam by her side. The boy's small hand gripped hers, and in his eyes shone a mixture of relief, admiration, and understanding. They had lost someone, yes, but they had also gained something far greater. A promise kept, a debt repaid, a legacy of courage. The townsfolk emerged cautiously from their homes, scanning the streets. They saw the signs of battle, but also the quiet dignity of survival. Murmurs spread through Redwater, stories of the rider who returned, who fought not for glory, but for love and honor. Some called him a hero, others called him a ghost, but all knew the truth. He had given everything for a promise. Hannah knelt in the soft morning light, touching the ground where he had fallen. "He loved us," she whispered, voice thick with grief and gratitude. "And he showed us what a promise is worth." Sam knelt beside her, eyes wide and solemn. "I'll remember," he said. "I'll carry it with me." Redwater would never forget. The echoes of gunfire faded into legend, but the memory remained, etched in the dust, the blood, and the rising curl of gunsmoke. Promises, it seemed, were stronger than death, stronger than fear, and in the hearts of those left behind, they burned eternal. Experience love, sacrifice, and suspense in the Wild West. Wild West eternal love brings legendary promises, heartbreak, and courage to life. Subscribe now and ride with us through every thrilling story of passion, danger, and unforgettable romance.